The midday sun cast a golden glow over the Oshobo market. Kemi, her heart beaming with joy, navigated the crowd stall, hand in hand with Tulu. The air was alive with the sight, sound, and the smell of the market day. Vibrant fabrics, the rhythmic calls of vendors, the inciting aroma of roasted plantains and suya. Tolu, though his pockets were often light, always found a way to make her smile. Today it was a small, intricately carved wooden bird, its wings outstretched as if in mid-flight. "This is you, Kemi," he said, his eyes sparkling with affection. "Always soaring, always reaching for the sky." Kemi's laughter echoed through the market. "And you, Tulu," she replied, "are the wind beneath my wings." She traced the delicate lines of the carvings, feeling the warmth of his love in the smooth wood. He then surprised her with a string of coral beads. That vibrant red, a stark contrast to her simple blue dress. "These," he declared, gently fastening them around her neck, "are to remind you of how precious you are to me." Their days were not filled with extravagant gifts, but with simple pleasures, shared laughter under the shade of a mango tree, stolen kisses by the river bank, whispered dreams under the vast night lights. Tolu, though his small business was still struggling, had a spirit that shone brighter than any gold. He spoke of a future where his hard work could provide them with a comfortable home, a loving family, and a life filled with joy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they found themselves by the river. Fireflies danced among the reeds, their tiny light mirroring the stars above. "Kemi," Tolu began, his voice husky with emotion, "I may not have much to offer you now, but I promise you this: my love for you will never fade. No matter what life throws our way, I will always come back to you." Kemi, her heart overflowing with love, leaned into his embrace. "And I will be here waiting." "Tolu," she whispered, "always." The happiness was infectious, a beacon of hope in a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. But as they walked home, hand in hand, an elderly woman, her face aged with wisdom of years, crossed their paths. She paused, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and warning. "Young love is a precious flame," she murmured, "but ambition can be a fierce wind. Guard your hearts, children, and hold on to your promises." Kemi felt a shiver run down her spine, a premonition of a storm brewing on the horizon. But Tolu, ever the optimist, simply squeezed her hand and smiled. "Don't worry, Kemi," he said. "Our love is stronger than any wind." As they continued their journey home, Kemi clutched the wooden bird tightly, a symbol of their shared dreams and unwavering devotion. The news spread through their small community like wildfire. Tolu had struck gold, a lucrative business deal, a stroke of luck that catapulted him from struggling entrepreneur to a man of wealth and influence. Kemi, though happy for his success, felt a knot of unease tighten in her stomach. Tolu, once a familiar figure in the bustling market, was now a stranger in a tailored suit, his days filled with meetings in high-rise buildings and negotiation with powerful men. His laughter, once warm and spontaneous, now seemed calculated and reserved. Hemi tried to reach him, to share in his joy, but a wall had risen between them. His phone calls became less frequent, his visits shorter, his eyes distant. "I'm busy, Kemi," he would say, his voice edged with impatience. "We'll celebrate when things settle down." But things never settled down. Tolu's world expanded, filled with lavish parties and influential acquaintances. Kemi, with her simple dresses and humble background, felt increasingly out of place. He pushed her to the corners of his life, a shadow in his ever-growing spotlight. One evening, Tolu insisted she accompany him to a grand party hosted by a prominent businessman. Kemi, hesitant but hopeful, donned her best dress, a simple Ankara gown that paled in comparison to the shimmery silk and satins of the other guests. The party was a whirlwind of champagne, kebabs, and superficial conversation. Kemi felt lost in a sea of unfamiliar faces, her unease growing with each passing moment. Then she saw her, a woman, tall and elegant, her laughter echoing through the opulent ballroom as she stood beside Tulu. Their hands brushed, their eyes met, and a spark ignited that Kemi could not deny. The woman was everything Kemi was not: sophisticated, confident, and undeniably wealthy. Tolu in her presence seemed to shed his old self, transforming into a man Kemi no longer recognized. Heartbreak washed over her, a tidal wave of betrayal and loss. She fled the party, the sound of laughter and music fading into a distant hum as tears streamed down her face. Days turned into weeks, and silence from Tolu grew deafening. He was lost to her, consumed by a world she could not penetrate. Then one morning, a messenger arrived at her doorstep bearing a single devastating letter. "It's over," it read, Tolu's familiar handwriting, a cruel mockery of their past promises. Kemi's world crumbled. The wooden bird, once a symbol of hope, now felt like a weight in her hand. She gathered the tokens of their love, the bird, the beads, the dried flowers, and cast them into the fire, watching as the flames consumed the remnants of a love betrayed. A year had passed, a year of quiet, gawning loneliness. Kemi's small home, once a haven of shared dream, now echoed with a silence of her grief. Each morning, as the sun streamed through the window, it seemed to mock her with a silent promise of flight, a promise Tolu had broken. She moved through her days in a haze, her spirits dimmed, her laughter silenced. The vibrant color of the market, once a source of joy, now seemed mute, like a faded photograph. The faces of her students, usually a source of comfort, now mirrored her own sadness, their bright eyes reflecting the emptiness she felt inside. Then, Femi entered her life. He was a constant, a reliable presence in her storm-tossed world. He was a respected member of the community, a man of quiet strength and gentle demeanor. He offered her something she desperately craved: stability, a sense of security, a haven from the relentless waves of greed. He didn't rush her, didn't demand her attention. He brought her small gifts: a bouquet of wildflowers picked from the roadside, a basket of ripe mangoes, a comforting word whispered when she needed it most. He listened patiently as she spoke of Tolu, her voice trembling with unshed tears, her heart aching with loss. He didn't try to erase Tolu from her memory, but offered a gentle hand to help her navigate the pain. One evening, as the sun dipped below its horizon, Femi knelt before her in a small courtyard. "Kemi," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I know your heart is broken. I know I can never replace what you've lost, but I can offer you a home, a family, a life where you will feel safe, cherished, and respected. Will you marry me?" Kemi's eyes welled with tears. She looked at Femi, his face etched with sincerity and compassion. She saw a man who offered not the fiery passion of youth, but the steady warmth of a comforting fire. She thought of the loneliness that had become her constant companion, the emptiness that gnawed at her soul. She thought of the future, a future that stretched before her, bleak and uncertain. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile sound in the stillness of the evening. "Yes, Femi, I'll marry you." It wasn't the declaration of love she had once dreamed of, but a quiet acceptance. A desperate, gasped at a lifeline in a sea of despair. The small traditional engagement ceremony was a blow of well-wished and forced smile. Family and friends celebrated their voices, a distant hum in the hollow ache that filled her heart. Kemi found a semblance, a peace in the classroom. The school became her sanctuary, a place where she could pour her energy into shaping young minds. a refuge from the growing unease at home. She cherished her students, their bright eyes and eager faces, a welcoming distraction from the shadows that haunted her. But the shadows followed her home, creeping into the corners of her life like a cold, insidious fog. Femi, though kind and gentle in public, began to unravel, began to reveal a controlling side, a subtle but persistent erosion of her independence. His criticism were veiled in consent, his demands disguised as suggestion. "That dress is too revealing," Kemi would say, his voice laced with disapproval. "It's not appropriate for a married woman. People will talk. Who was that man you were talking to at the market? I don't like you speaking to strangers. It's not safe." He questioned her friendship, subtly isolating her from her support system. He insisted on knowing her every move, her very conversation, her every thought. His words, though seemingly harmless, chipped away at her confidence, slowly eroding her sense of self. He would ask her students questions about her behavior and what men she spoke to. He would arrive at school unannounced to bring her lunch and check on her. Then came Toby, a new student with a bright smile and a curious mind. He was a breath of fresh air, a spark of joy in Kemi's otherwise daily life. He reminded her of her younger self, full of dreams and aspiration, a mirror of reflecting the vibrant spirit she had lost. Kemi noticed the change in Kemi, the way her eyes lit up when Toby was around, the easy camaraderie between them, the shared laughter. A seed of suspicion took root in his mind, a dark insider seed that had threatened to poison their already fragile marriage. He started watching her more closely, his gaze filled with a possessive intensity that made Kemi's skin crawl. The school bell rang, signaling the end of another day. Kemi watched as her students filled out the classroom, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Toby lingered, a textbook clutched in his hand, a question in his eyes. "Mrs. Kemi," he began, "I don't understand this passage. Could you explain it again?" Kemi smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She appreciated Toby's eagerness to learn, his genuine curiosity. She sat beside him, patiently explaining the complex passage, her voice gentle and encouraging. As she spoke, she noticed a familiar gesture, the way he tilted his head when he was thinking, the way his eyes lit up when he grasped a new concept. It was a gesture that echoed someone from her past. A wave of nostalgia washed over her, a bittersweet ache in her heart. She found herself drawn to Toby, not in a romantic way, but in a way that felt deeply familiar, comforting. He was like a breath of fresh air in her stifling life, a reminder of the dream she had once held dear. Their conversation extended beyond the classroom. They discussed books, shared their dreams, and laughed at silly jokes. Toby's enthusiasm was infectious, his energy a stark contrast to the quiet resignation that had settled over Kemi's life. He would ask her about her past, her dreams, and what made her happy. Kemi was hesitant at first, but she found herself confiding in him, sharing fragments of her life. Her voice hushed, her eyes filled with a longing she couldn't explain. "You remind me of someone," she said one afternoon, her voice barely a whisper. "Someone I once loved very much." Toby's eyes widened, a flicker of curiosity in their depths. "Who?" he asked, his voice soft. Kemi hesitant, her gaze drifting to the window. "It's a long story," she said, her voice tingling with sadness, "and it brings back painful memories." She told him about her first love, about the dreams they had shared, about the sudden, inexplicable abandonment. She spoke of the heartbreak, the loneliness, the empty that had followed. She omitted Tulu's name, but the pain in her voice was palpable. Toby listened intently, his eyes filled with compassion. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes, but simply listened, offering a silent understanding that Kemi desperately needed. Meanwhile, Kemi's suspicion grew. He watched Kemi and Toby, his eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. He saw the way they laughed together, the easy camaraderie between them. He heard the whispers in the hallway, The hushed conversation, the shared secret. He began to follow Kemi after school, lurking in the shadows, watching her every move. He questioned her colleagues, his voice laced with suspicion, his words tangled with jealousy. He went through her belongings, searching for clues, evidence of her supposed betrayal. He would come home and ask detailed questions about her day, about what she spoke about with Toby. He was becoming more and more paranoid. His control over Kemi was becoming tighter and more obvious. The air in Kemi's home crackled with an unspoken tension. Femi's eyes, usually warm and gentle, were now hard and cold, fixed on Kemi with a possessive intensity that made her skin crawl. The questions had become accusations. The subtle criticism had turned to harsh condemnation. "Why were you talking to him after school again?" Kemi demanded, his voice low and menacing. "What do you have to hide?" Kemi's heart pounded in her chest, fear mixing with growing sense of defiance. "He needed help with his studies," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "He's a good student," Femi sneered, "or a good excuse." He paced the room, his movement agitated, his words laced with venom. "I've seen the way you look at him," he hissed, "the way you smile. You think I'm blind? I know what's going on." "Nothing is going on," Kemi insisted, her voice rising. "You are imagining things. Imagine him." Femi laughed a harsh, humorless sound. "I've been watching you, Kemi. I've seen the way you whisper together, the way you laugh. I've heard the whispers in the hallway. Everyone knows." "There is nothing to know," Kemi said, her voice shaking. "We are just friends." "Friends?" Femi's eyes narrowed. "You think I'm a fool? You think I'll let you make a fool of me?" He grabbed her arm, his grip tight, his fingers digging into her skin. "You are mine, Kemi," he snarled. "Mine. I won't let anyone take you away from me." Kemi flinched, her fear turning to anger. "Let go of me, Femi," she said, her voice sharp. "You're hurting me." He released her arm, but his eyes remained fixed on her, burning with a jealous rage. "Don't lie to me, Kemi," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "I won't tolerate it." The next day, as Kemi walked home from school, she noticed Femi lurking in the shadows, his eyes following her every move. She felt a chill run down her spine, a sense of dread that settled in her stomach. As she approached her home, she saw Toby standing by the gate, waiting for her. "Mrs. Kemi," he said, his voice filled with concern, "I wanted to give this to you." He held out a small hand-drawn card. Before Kemi could react, Femi emerged from the shadows, his face contoured with rage. "What's going on here?" Toby stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. "I was just giving her a card," he stammered. "Get away from her," Femi shouted, his voice filled with venom. He shoved Toby aside, sending him stumbling. "Femi, stop!" Kemi cried, her voice filled with terror. But Femi was beyond reason. He lunged at Toby, his fist connecting with the boy's jaw. Toby crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Kemi screamed, her voice echoing through the quiet neighborhood. She rushed to Toby's side, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. He was breathing, but his face was pale and still. "What have you done?" she cried, her eyes filled with horror. Kemi stood over them, his chest heavy, his eyes filled with a dark, triumphant rage. "I told you," he said, his voice cold. "He was trying to take you away from me." Kemi, her heart pounding with fear and desperation, knew she had to get Toby to the hospital. She grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed for help. Femi for once was silent, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to Kemi as she sat beside Toby's hospital bed. He had regained consciousness, but his eyes were vacant, his gaze distant. The boy she knew, bright and curious student, was gone. "Toby," she said softly, reaching out to touch his hand. "Do you know where you are? Do you know who I am?" He looked at her, his eyes blank. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, his voice weak. "I don't know who you are." The doctors explained that Toby had suffered a concussion, and while physically he was recovering, his memory was still fragmented. There was no guarantee he would regain it. Kemi visited him daily, her heart heavy with a mixture of guilt and sorrow. She read to him, talked about their shared moment, hoping to trigger a spark of recognition. But Toby remained unresponsive, a shell of his former self. Days turned into weeks and Toby and physical recovery progressed. He was discharged from the hospital, but he remained a stranger to Kemi. His personality was altered, his spirit diminished. It was as if the light that had once shone so bright within him had been extinguished. Kemi, though heartbroken, knew she had to let him go. She couldn't force him to remember, couldn't cling to a ghost of the boy she had come to care for. With a heavy heart, she said goodbye, leaving him with his family. Months passed and Kemi tried to rebuild her life. She had severed all ties with Femi. The return of the bride price, a final act of defiance. She focused on her teaching, finding solace in the company of her students. One afternoon, while running errands in the neighborhood town, Kemi stopped short, her breath catching in her throat. Standing before her was a man she recognized. Yet she didn't. He was tall, his eyes filled with a familiar intensity, his presence radiating with a quiet strength. Kemi, he said, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. It's me, Tulu. Kemi stared at him, her mind reeling. Tolu, she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. But how? Kemi, Tolu began, his voice heavy with the weight of his past. I need to explain everything to you. I need you to understand what happened. He took a deep breath, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. Went through. I was swept away, he confessed. The world of wealth and power was intoxicating. I became arrogant and blinded by ambition. I thought I had everything figured out, that I was invincible. He paused, his gaze drifting to the ground. Then it happened. I was driving home late one night, after a business dinner. The roads were slick with rain, and I was driving too fast. I lost control of the car and everything went black. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with remorse. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My body was broken, my mind hazy. The doctors told me I had been in coma for months. My business, my wealth, everything I had built, it was all gone. And then he continued, his voice trembling. I found out about her. He was referring to the woman Kemi had seen him with at the party. She was there in the beginning when I was rich and powerful. And when I was broken and when I needed her most, she abandoned me. She never visited, never called. She simply disappeared. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. I realized then how foolish I had been. I had traded true love for empty promises, genuine affection for fleeting pleasure. I had lost you, Kemi, and I had no one left. While I was in coma, I was aware of things like a ghost or a dream. I saw how you suffered, how Femi treated you. I felt your pain as if it were my own. I was so sorry. I wanted to come back to you to beg for your forgiveness, but I was trapped. He looked at her, his eyes pleading. When I found myself in Toby's body, it was like a miracle, a second chance, but I was afraid. I didn't know how to tell you, how to explain, and I was afraid you would never forgive me. Kemi listened, her heart aching for the man she had once loved. She saw the genuine remorse in his eyes. The pain ached on his face, but the wound of the past were still raw, the scar still fresh. I understand, Tulu, she said, her voice soft but firm. But understanding doesn't erase the pain. You broke my heart, you abandoned me, and you left me to pick up the pieces of my life. I need time, Tolu nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. I know, he said. I'll wait. I'll spend my life trying to earn your forgiveness. Days turned into weeks, and Tolu remained a constant presence in Kemi's life, a quiet strength in her world. He didn't pressure her, didn't demand her attention, but simply offered his support, his friendship, his unwavering devotion. One afternoon, as Kemi was walking in her garden, Tolu approached her, his hands clasped behind his back. Kemi, he said, his voice hesitant, I have something for you. He held out a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond necklace shimmered in the sunlight. It's a gift, he said, his voice soft, a symbol of my regret, my desire to make amends. Kemi looked at the necklace, her eyes filled with a mixture of longing and resentment. I can't accept this, Tolu, she said, her voice firm. I don't want your money. I don't want your gift. I want you to understand that you can't buy my forgiveness. Tolu nodded. His face ached with disappointment. He closed the box and tucked it into his pocket. I understand, he said, but please let me help you. Let me help you build a new life. A life where you'll be free from fear and want. He paused, his eyes searching hers. Use the money to build a school, Kemi, a place where children can learn and grow. A place where dreams can take flight. Kemi hesitated, her mind swelling with conflicting emotions. She thought of her students, their bright eyes filled with hope, their futures hanging in the balance. She thought of the opportunity to create a safe haven, a place where they could flourish. All right, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I'll accept your help, but not for me. For them, for the children. Tolu smiled a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Thank you, Kemi, he said. Thank you for giving me a second chance. The building of the school became a symbol of their renewed connection, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the possibility of redemption. They worked side by side, their hands building not just a school, but a bridge between their past and their future. They spent time together and began to build trust again. And over time, Kemi's heart began to heal. The scar of the past fading, the promise of a new beginning taking root. And so, they found their second chance, their love reborn from the ashes of betrayal and loss. They wed in a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by people who mattered most. They lived a life of purpose, their love a testament to an endured power of forgiveness and the possibility of redemption. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like and leave a comment as it helps us grow. What do you think about this story? If you were in Kemi's shoes, would you forgive Tulu? And click on the link to watch the next video coming up. And I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Please click on the subscribe button to support us. Turn on the post notification to get notified when I upload a new story. Like, share, and comment your thoughts. Till then, bye.